Welcome to another episode of Design Under Influence, the show where we demystify what does it take to make technology as your competitive advantage, specifically for architecture, design, and engineering firms. My name is Alex Osenenko. I'm your co-host, and I'm joined here with my partner in crime.
Hey, everyone. I'm Boris Rappaport, and I'm here to provide some information and make this podcast exciting for you.
AKA the Beard of Knowledge.
The Beard of Knowledge.
That's it. That's your new nickname. All right. Well, why design under influence? Well, it's because we feel like if you're not investing in technology, you're not thinking along those lines for growing your business, it's sort of hazy, and you potentially it's like can be compared as designing under influence, and that's not always the good thing. So today, talking about replacing your old file server. I mean, we recently had a number of calls, not even one, a number of calls where, and actually a lot of times that's a trigger that we get a phone call from a prospective client because they're like, okay, well, my server is no longer as efficient or as effective, and what should I do to replace it? How does the process work? What are some of the options? So we're going to dive into this topic today with Boris. Boris, lead us into this. What is the typical sort of phone call you get? What situations do business owners find themselves when it comes to replacing their older server files?
Well,
file server.
Well, the call you just mentioned, as you said, we get a few of those, and it's a better phone call to get than the one that, oh, my file server just failed. I can't access any of my files. Please help right away. Right. So if you're at that point, it's not a great position to be in. But if you're just calling us because you notice that, your file server is much slower than it used to be, and maybe, opening files is not as fast, and maybe you can't save files, maybe it ran out of space. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen to a file server. We can definitely help with that situation, right? So we recently got one where a prospective client called us, and they had an older Mac file server. Imagine that, which they've had for almost 10 years, and they realized that file server can no longer support their organization. A, it was much slower, and B, it couldn't run the software that they needed to run. They run a specific CAD software called ArchiCAD, and the latest version of ArchiCAD was not supported on their Mac OS, the latest version of Mac OS that could run on that server. So situations like that happen. Usually we ask business owners not to get it to that type of a situation, right? We ask to try and document and kind of monitor how long ago the equipment was bought. So at least, you can take a look at, all right, well, this is 5 years old. I think next year we need to start thinking, we need to start replacing it and budget for that type of investment.
I think that's kind of key, budgeting for it. I think what you said in some previous conversations we had that was videotaped for this cast is, people underestimate how old their equipment is.
Yeah. Right? Well, as people, we tend to underestimate a lot of things, right? One is how long it takes us to do a certain thing, right? We think it only takes us 15 minutes when in reality it takes like close to an hour. I'm guilty of that. But people also tend to underestimate when they made an investment, because once you buy something, it's kind of out of sight and out of mind. And you just think, oh yeah, we just upgraded our server recently, maybe less than 3 years ago. And then you look at the actual documentation and it's been 7 years or longer. So yeah.
So let's get into the specifics. So now you're in a situation, you have a Mac server, PC server. It's 7 years old. It's no longer the versioning of software that's on it is no longer supporting what you need to do to run your business, specifically the heavy architecture and design type of softwares. Next step, Boris, what do you do next?
You call us, but no. In reality, we need to look at what options. Well, we need to look at a holistic picture of your business, which tools you're using, what other tools are dependent on this file server, right? Because again, it's not just files, it's also CAD drawings, and it's other things that you're using for your business. And then looking at that holistically, we can come up with a plan to figure out where to move it. And it could be at a high level, it could be going to different places. We prefer, if you're a smaller firm, to get you going in the cloud because it eliminates a lot of risk for the business. And it also allows people to more easily work remotely, which we're all doing right now anyway, and gives other advantages in terms of just being more nimble and more efficient as a business. But another option would be to just replace the file server. So if you're a larger organization, it may be more cost effective to replace that server with something that's more recent and get some additional advantages there.
Can we talk about just give a high level cost analysis of going to cloud versus replacing the server? Yeah, financial side of it.
So if we're just looking at files where it's your documents, your Excel spreadsheets, your PDFs, then cloud storage will cost you, we'll start at $5 per person per month, which is basically negligible, right? I mean, it's like $5 is one cup of coffee. If we're just talking about moving those files over, then that's the investment that you're looking to make. So if you're a 10-person firm, $50 a month will get you, 50 to 100 terabytes of cloud file storage.
Now, and what platforms do you, sorry to interrupt, I just want to get our listeners some particular info. What sort of providers do you recommend usually there?
So it would be either a Google Workspace. It used to be Google G Suite. Now it's Google Workspaces, or a Microsoft Office 365 platform. Both are great. And depending on where you run your email, that's where your files should be. So if you're running your email in Microsoft Office 365, then use the Microsoft OneDrive platform for your file sharing or file storage. If you're running your email in Google Gmail, then use the Google Workspaces, Google G Suite as part of it.
Okay. So $50 a month, that's very sort of attractive for business owners. Let's say you have a 10-person firm, boom, done deal. Talk to us about the implementation process, because it sounds pretty daunting. Well, not daunting, but pretty complicated, complex, fairly a lot of moving parts. Or is it simpler enough? Like what is the implementation time and cost and resources as far as hours and such?
So one thing, Alex, that we still have to touch on before we go that route is that was for moving just the standard documents. Now with CAD and BIM models, it's a little different, right? So depending on what kind of CAD and BIM software you use, and mostly our clients either use the Autodesk software, which is probably the leader right now in the industry, and others use, ArchiCAD from Graphisoft, which is, the second biggest player in the industry. So depending on what software you use there's some additional costs associated with it. So if you want to move your Autodesk BIM files, BIM models into the cloud, you have to get a service called Autodesk BIM 360. And that service is going to run you about $100 per user per month. So it's a lot more than the $50 for the Google G Suite. Similarly, with ArchiCAD, they have a service called BIM Cloud, and that one is less expensive than the Autodesk, but there's still some investment there. And that one costs you around $400 per year per user.
That's
some additional investments.
Yeah.
There's some additional investments to consider because of the specificity of the architecture and design software.
Gotcha. But let's just call for now, let's say you do get that Bluebeam cloud subscription. Then so the next step is to move all of the files. I just want to isolate that for a second.
Sure.
Like move all the server files into Google Drive or into Microsoft Office 365. What is the process like? Is it time consuming? Like what is it like?
Well, yeah. I mean, so basically the way it works is you have to install some tools on the existing file server and set up what we call a synchronization component so that you start synchronizing your files from the on-premise file server into the cloud storage, right? A first pass happens and it moves, it copies all the files up to the cloud. And then as you're working on your files, all the changes then get synchronized in subsequent passes. And once those changes, get synchronized, then we can schedule a cutover date. And basically at that point, you're no longer using your on-premise file server. all your file shares are going to be pointed to the cloud, so you can access your files in the cloud already.
Gotcha. So it sounds pretty structured, and there's not a highly complex way to manage it, since it syncs it up. You don't need to drop it one by one. Okay. What about replacing the? So let me just sum this up. For going to cloud, smaller firms, probably the best way to do it, and that is, Google Drive or Microsoft 365. You pay your $50 a month, plus, a little bit more, a little bit less. And plus you have a subscription for your CAD software, cloud services, and you are home free. Now, you mentioned another option is to actually replace the server. Can you walk us through the costs there?
Sure. So again, as you said, for smaller firms, probably going to cloud will make sense financially, plus they'll get additional benefits. For larger firms who already make other IT investments into security, redundancy, infrastructure stability, it may make sense to just replace the file server in place. And depending on what other infrastructure they have there, the costs are going to be different. But if we're just talking about, a single physical server, replacing it one for one, then we're probably looking at about $4,000 to $5,000 in costs for the server and the software. And then additional, I'm going to say, 24 to 36 hours to move all the files, move all the services that are needed, reconfigure all the workstations to point to the new server, and make sure everything is working properly. Now, in addition to that, again, depending on which BIM or CAD software you use, there may need to be some additional repathing inside of those applications to point to the right place.
Gotcha. So 24 to 36 hours you mentioned is labor. That's IT project management. That's if they buy it outside or like hire firm like ours, like $200 a month, or per hour, or is it different pricing usually? What's the hourly rate usually to get that service?
The hourly rate for this service is around $200 per hour.
Got it. So, looking at this mathematically, $4,000 to $5,000 for the physical equipment plus software. And let's call it 30 hours, right? At $200, that's another $6,000. So it's a $10,000 plus adventure or you allow your organization to fail essentially when that file server dies. So those are your options, or go to cloud, which is, I guess, less initially, but over time, it'll probably be subscription-wise, it's going to be more expensive. And specifically, I love that you mentioned, like, larger firms may still replace a server, it still be advantageous if they have the infrastructure, right. Yeah, security and all that, because that's, the cloud providers invest a lot into that, and individual businesses are unable to provide the level of security necessary for that file server to be secure. And I imagine if you work with government and other stuff, there's regulations on how you keep your files and whatnot. So that was very, very good. So really appreciate your time, Boris. Those of you who are watching and need help with the file servers, give us a call. We're getarcit.com. You click talk to us or work with us, depending on what we're testing at the time on the website. And then work with us is what it's there right now. Yeah. And just give us a call, man. At friendly service, fair pricing, but unbelievable value. That's what I want to provide to you. Boris, any parting words of wisdom?
Technology is your competitive advantage, always.
True that. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.